Hello there. Today I thought we'd explore something a little bit different today. We're going to be ranking the Exotica sounds of Martin Denny. Martin Denny was born in 1911 and his first album came out in 1957 and he continued to produce albums till about 1970. I think he did produce one album after that, but during that time he put out so many albums. He put out probably about 2.5 albums a year. So anyway, Exotica, if you've never heard of it, is a type of music that uses kind of ethnic sounding Polynesian, Japanese, different instruments along with regular American instruments. And generally it has a kind of an artificial sound that reminds you of like Africa or Polynesia or East Asia, different things like that. And a lot of it has sound effects like birds and different things in it. And it was very popular in the late 50s. And Martin Denny's first album that he put out was in 1957 when he was like 46 years old. So he didn't put out an album until he was like 46. But I'm going to be ranking his first dozen albums, which are actually his Exotica albums. After that, he kind of went into more easy listening kind of sound. And although he did put out some good albums since then, they didn't have the Exotica sound that he became famous for. Martin Denny lived until like 2005. He died when he was like 93, I think. And he remained active till pretty much before his death. He played at a tsunami in 2004, 2005 for a benefit for that tsunami. So yeah, he was active musically right up till the time he died. But anyway, let's get started. Like I said, this is a dozen albums which run from 1957 to about 1961. So the 12th one, now ranking these is kind of difficult because they're basically, each one has like 12 songs on it or 12 pieces of music on it. And some of them are Martin Denny originals and some of them are, what do you call it, redos of other pieces that have already been done. So anyway, in my opinion, these are from the least favorite to my favorite, and I think every one of these are decent albums. If you like that kind of music, there's probably not a whole lot of difference in how good one is, but there's a couple that I really think are better than the rest. But anyway, let's get started. My 12th album, number 12, is Exotic Sounds on Broadway. Because it has to do with pieces of music that are already well known. There's no original Martin Denny pieces on this one. And he had already gotten a little bit of that easy listening feel within his music. However, these last albums are actually a little more easy listening than his main, I'd say 9 first albums, which were like totally Exotica. It's a good album. It does have some of those sound effects and different things in it. 12 songs, pieces like The Sound of Music, My Funny Valentine, Strike Up the Band, Carousel Waltz. And of course they get a kind of an Exotica treatment, so they don't necessarily sound like the way you're used to hearing them. Anyway, that's number 12. Number 11, Exotic Sounds of the Silver Screen, is kind of similar, except more movie based than Broadway based. And there are pieces on here like Singing in the Rain, Frankie and Johnny, Over the Rainbow, Off to See the Wizard, Love is a Many Splendored Thing. And again, there's no originals, Martin Denny originals on here. It is just his treatment of pretty much standards. My number 10, The Enchanted Sea. This was, I want to say, his 10th album. It came out probably around 1959. although very much an Exotic album, this one also is one where he kind of started that easy listening a little bit, but it does have a Martin Denny original on it. And it does have a little more of the Exotica sound. Oh, I should mention, the girl on the cover of all these albums is exactly the same woman, although her name is Sandy Warner, and she was actually an actress too. She had been in a Twilight Zone and a couple of other TV shows roles she had. Sandy Warner, and she's on all 12 of these albums, and she was actually on some albums after that, but she's usually has different makeup and stuff, so a lot of times when you look at her, you don't think it's the same woman. But yeah, he pretty much used her exclusively in the early times. The next one, Exotic Percussion. This is the newest album on my list. Came out in 1961, and it kind of was a little bit of a return to the more Exotica sound of his earlier albums. After this album, he pretty much went completely to a more easy listening sound. An interesting easy listening sound, but it was a little bit more interesting, or more easy listening. But on here, there's a couple of Martin Denny, well, there's one Martin Denny original, and the rest are basically just standards like Girlfriend of a Whirling Dervish, My Tane, Miserlou, and Give with His Treatment. The next one up, Quiet Village. Now, when Martin Denny got started, he had a hit on 45 called Quiet Village. And it's on his first album. This is not his first album. This is like his eighth album. And it has a version of Quiet Village on it, but it's a little bit shortened from his original, the one on his original album. I believe it's probably the one that they used on the 45, but I'm not sure. And this has a little bit of that easy listening sound, but it still has quite a bit of that Exotica sound that he was famous for. My next one is Exotica 2, his second album. And these are his early albums. His best period was probably in these albums is probably the middle period. But like I said, these albums, there's not a whole lot of difference between the quality of them. But I mean, there's every one of them has some pretty interesting pieces on it. Ebb Tide is probably the most well-known one on this one. And these albums was like some of the first ones to use stereophonic sound that's completely transistorized. Yeah, these are original copies from the 50s. By the way, I think I got one on here that's not, but I'll let you know when I get to it. This next one is his first album, Exotica. This is the one with the long version of Quiet Village on it. Now this particular version is the mono version. I do have the stereo version, and you can see there's quite a difference in the top of the cover where they actually broadcast the word stereo on there. Back in the late 50s, stereo was a big thing, so they really, really wanted people to know when you were getting a stereo album. But anyway, this album is pretty decent. It probably would rank a little lower if it didn't have Quiet Village on it. But it's got some pretty interesting stuff. The use of these instruments, some of these instruments weighed a lot. I mean, Martin Denny himself played the piano and the celeste, but a lot of the people in there played these weird percussion instruments, and most of these albums are loaded with that stuff. This next one is Exotica 3. Now, to me, these are the albums that are actually starting to sound to be my higher ranking albums. Caravan is on here, Moon of the Monokura, and Limehouse Blues. There are some pretty cool versions of classic songs from the time. In the late 50s, instrumentals was like pretty darn popular, so you know these albums had no trouble selling pretty good. This one, Primitiva. This one has Jamaica Farewell on it, and it's got some pretty good Burma Train, which has a kind of a beat that's supposed to imitate the sound of a train and stuff. So there's some pretty interesting stuff on here. And if you look at this, you'll look at the cover. This woman definitely looks a little bit different than what you're used to seeing on some of the other albums. This is like this is when they really started getting good. Forbidden Island is about the equivalent of Primitiva. They're both pretty darn good. Valley High is on here. That's probably the big one that people would know. Maybe Port-au-Prince. And March of the Siamese Children, which is also on the Exotic Sounds of the Silver Screen, or Broadway, one of the two. But yeah, this is a pretty good album too. It has a piece on it called Cobra, which kind of simulates the sound of like when a snake charmer charming the snake. So there's a lot of interesting things on these albums. Next one, which is my next to the favorite, Afro-Desia. He went a little more for more African sound than Polynesian sound, which most of the other ones are Polynesian or Hawaiian. But yeah, this one definitely has a more African feel to it. Although like the others, they're not truly that kind of music. It's just kind of what was kind of like an American version that kind of reminds you of it. And the songs on here that are a little more well known would be Jungle Drums, Temptation, and Siboney. This album has vocals on it. This is one of the few that has vocals on it. One of the two actually. And it's kind of something that's kind of simulate a African native language, but it's totally made up. It's basically just gibberish, but it sounds pretty realistic. That's that. And my favorite, Hypnotique, or Hypnotic, however you want to say it. It's got St. Louis Blues, Summertime, Japanese Sandman. It's also got vocals on it, and oddly enough, and I forget whether it's this one or the one I just played, but one of these has the vocalist, I think it's this one, that played the theme song from the Flintstones, the Van Horne singers they call them. But anyway, this album here is different enough where some of it's a little bit avant-garde, but there again, but it's still like it's still individual tracks, and there's several Martin Denny. I think there's like 3 or 4 Martin Denny originals on this one, but this is my favorite one, and that's the ranking. So yeah, that's the 12 Martin Denny albums from the Exotica period, which hope you enjoyed this. And I know it's not going to necessarily appeal to the same rock audience, but I like a lot of different kinds of music. I like classical music and jazz, with a hard jazz, or what they used to call contemporary jazz, which was kind of like easy listening. But I just wanted to do something a little different today, and as time goes on, I'll do more progressive rock and probably other different things. And I'm thinking about maybe branching a little bit out into science fiction movies and stuff like that. But anyway, that's it. If you liked it, this video, then give it a thumbs up. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care.